All right, today we're going to get into a story that will absolutely get under your skin. Charlotte Perkins Gilman's classic, The Yellow Wallpaper. It's a story that starts out as this quiet little summer vacation, but it quickly spirals into a really haunting journey into a mind that's, well, completely under siege.
Okay, let's just dive right in. From the very beginning, our narrator has this deep, unsettling feeling about the place. You know that feeling? It's not something she can really explain, just this gut instinct that this huge, isolated house they've rented is wrong. It's definitely not the peaceful retreat it's supposed to be.
I mean, on the surface, it all sounds pretty perfect, right? A beautiful old mansion, fresh country air, a chance to get better. But that perfect picture gets complicated right away because of the relationship between her and her husband, John. He's a doctor, a very practical man who only trusts what he can see and touch. So when she talks about her feelings of unease, he just writes it off as, female fantasy.
And this gets us to the narrator's big internal struggle, which is there from page 1. There's this massive gap between what she's actually feeling in her body and her mind and how the world, especially her husband, decides to label her problem.
So this is the official diagnosis he gives her, temporary nervous depression. But here's the real kicker. John, being both her husband and her doctor, doesn't actually seem to believe she's sick at all. He treats her like a silly, imaginative child who needs to be managed, not like a patient who needs to be understood. Her own feelings? Totally invalid in his eyes.
So what's she supposed to do? Well, this is her very first act of quiet rebellion. John has forbidden her from doing any work, and for him, that includes writing. So she starts keeping a journal in secret. It becomes her only real friend, the one place she can admit to all these thoughts and fears that her own husband says are just irrational and bad for her.
Now, we've got to talk about the so-called treatment. This rest cure was a real thing back in the 19th century, and frankly, it was notorious. It was often prescribed for women with nervous conditions. But for our narrator, this prescription of doing absolutely nothing is a complete disaster, because it's the exact opposite of everything her intuition is telling her she needs to get well.
Just look at this stark difference. On one side, you have her own mind, which is just screaming for something to do, for interesting work, for people to talk to, for anything to keep it busy. And on the other side, you have his prescription, total passivity. No work, no writing, no thinking, just absolute mind-numbing rest.
And this is the real trap she's in. She knows deep down that his cure is making her worse, but in that time, his authority as both a doctor and a man is just absolute. She feels totally powerless, so she has to go along with a treatment that she feels is actually poisoning her mind.
So let's talk about the actual room she's confined to, because this room at the top of the house isn't just a background detail. It becomes the entire world for her deteriorating mind. He might call it a nursery, but for her, it becomes a prison.
She actually tells him she'd prefer a room downstairs, one that's pretty and opens out onto the garden. But of course, John knows best. He overrules her and picks this nursery for her, a room at the very top of the house, isolated and just strange. His choice really just hammers home how much control he has over every single part of her life.
And the room itself is full of these really disturbing contradictions. Okay, so it's airy and has lots of sunshine, but the windows have bars on them. The floor is all scratched up and gouged. The bed is nailed down and looks like it's been through the wars. And then there's the wallpaper, this repulsive, sickly, sulfur yellow wallpaper.
As these weeks of forced boredom just crawl by, her whole world starts to shrink. The big estate, the gardens, it all just fades away. Her focus narrows until it's fixed, with this obsessive intensity on that one hideous feature of the room, the yellow wallpaper.
She describes the pattern as chaotic, without logic. It infuriates her. So instead of letting her mind rest, it does the exact opposite. With absolutely nothing else to do, this ugly, confusing pattern becomes a kind of dark puzzle that her starving imagination feels compelled to solve.
And it isn't long before she starts seeing things in the design. Horrifying things. This is one of the first shapes she makes out, a figure with a broken neck and two bulbous eyes. It's like something has been strangled right there in the pattern on her wall.
And once she sees that one figure, her perception just snaps. The shape multiplies. Suddenly, she sees eyes everywhere, staring at her from all over the walls.
The wallpaper isn't just paper anymore. It's alive, and it's watching her.
And that leads her to one last, chilling discovery. She starts to see something else, a kind of sub-pattern that's moving behind the main design. At first it's faint, but she can make out the shape of a woman, stooping and creeping around behind the bars of the front pattern. So the question is, who is this woman? And what's going to happen when she finally gets out?
All right, today we're peeling back the layers of one of the most haunting stories in all of literature. Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. It's this chilling, first-person story of a woman's mind completely unraveling while she's trapped in a single room, supposedly for her own good.
And that brings us to this central, absolutely terrifying question of the story. I mean, what happens when the very thing that's supposed to heal you actually pushes you to the brink of insanity?
Okay, so our narrator is suffering from what her husband, John, who's also her doctor, calls a nervous condition. And his prescription? It's something called a rest cure. This was a real thing back then, where women were basically forbidden from doing anything, no mental or physical stimulation at all. She's stuck in this old nursery in a secluded house, a room with bars on the windows and that awful yellow wallpaper. And right away, you see this huge gap between what he thinks is happening and what's actually going on. John, with all his medical authority, is convinced the treatment's working. He just sees a patient who's following orders. But from her side, the isolation is just suffocating. Doing nothing isn't restful. It's mentally exhausting. And her loneliness and sadness are just spiraling. So this is her one act of rebellion. John has told her no writing because he thinks it's too much for her mind. But she does it anyway, in secret. This journal she's keeping is her only lifeline, you know? It's the only place she can process all the chaos in her head that she's not allowed to talk about. It's a really desperate grab for self-expression. Her relationship with John is, well, it's complicated. He says he loves her, but he treats her like a little kid, always dismissing her feelings and controlling everything she does. He infantilizes her. And in this really chilling moment of clarity, she says she's glad it's her and not her baby who's trapped in that nursery. She already knows how toxic that room is, even if she can't quite put her finger on why. And this is where the story takes a really dark turn. With nothing else to do, no other stimulation, her mind just latches onto the biggest, ugliest thing in the room, that confusing yellow wallpaper. So it's not just a passing dislike anymore. Oh no, it becomes a project. Her intense loneliness drives her to study the paper, trying to figure out its chaotic design. She spends hours just staring. And this activity, which is supposed to be rest, leaves her completely drained. That wallpaper is literally becoming her entire world.
So all of this intense focus, it starts to warp her perception of reality. The patterns aren't just patterns anymore. She starts to see something moving inside them. Her mind, so desperate for something to do, is starting to create its own reality.
As the light changes in the room, she notices something that should be impossible. The top layer of the pattern, the part she's been studying so hard, it starts to move. It's not a static object anymore. And then, behind that shifting top layer, she sees it, a faint, blurry shape, a figure. It's a terrifying moment, a really clear sign that her grip on reality is starting to break. She actually gives it a name, the sub-pattern, and it's a woman trapped behind the front design, and she's always creeping around and shaking the main pattern, like you're bars on a cage, trying to get out. This is such a brilliant metaphor for her own psychological state, right? A woman trapped by her husband, her doctor, and her society, shaking the bars of her own confinement. So when she finally works up the courage to tell him how distressed she is, to beg him to just leave this house, John completely shuts her down. He tells her she's getting better and that giving in to these fancies is the worst thing she could do. His dismissal is just absolute, and it forces her right back into silence and even deeper into the secret world of the wallpaper. That total dismissal from John pushes her even further into secrecy. Since there's no one she can talk to, her life basically splits in two. She puts on a show for her husband and his sister, but her real life, the one that matters to her, now happens in the shadows, focused completely on that wall. And there's this really stark difference between her daytime life and her nighttime life. By day, she rests, she plays the part of the good patient, and the woman in the wall is quiet. But at night, everything changes. The pattern on the wall transforms into prison bars, and the trapped woman behind them becomes frantic. Our narrator stays awake for hours, just watching, feeling this connection with her, while everyone else is asleep. At this point, she's actively deceiving her caretakers. She knows that if they found out about her obsession, they'd just see it as more proof that she's sick, so she hides it. And this adds a whole new layer of fear and paranoia to her already fragile state. She's not just a patient anymore, she's a secret keeper. And her paranoia just gets worse and worse. She starts to see John and his sister Jenny looking at the wallpaper, even touching it. She becomes completely convinced that they're also trying to figure out the pattern. It's not just her secret anymore. Now it's a race. She feels this desperate urgency to solve the mystery before they do. At one point, she actually catches Jenny touching the wall. Jenny gets startled and gives this perfectly reasonable explanation. The yellow color is just rubbing off on their clothes. But for our narrator, who's so deep in her paranoia, that mundane reason is impossible to believe. She's sure it's a lie, a cover story for Jenny's own secret investigation. And this is where we leave her, just teetering on the brink. Her mission to free the woman in the wall has become an obsession that has totally consumed her own identity. The line between them has completely blurred. So we have to ask, is she solving the mystery of the wallpaper? Or has she become the prisoner she's trying to save? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling the absolutely chilling final act of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's classic story, The Yellow Wallpaper. We're going to trace the narrator's terrifying spiral right to its unforgettable conclusion. All right, so let's just jump right in with the story's massive central irony. The narrator starts this last section feeling better. She's excited, she has energy, but why? Well, as she admits to herself, it's all because she's now completely 100% obsessed with the wallpaper. And you know who's buying this improvement? Her husband, John. Remember, he's the doctor who prescribed this whole rest cure, basically locking her in a room and telling her not to think. He's so relieved she seems happier, but he has absolutely no clue that what he's seeing isn't recovery. It's her mind sinking deeper and deeper into the world of that awful wallpaper. So this is what really kicks things into high gear. They're about to leave the house and the clock is ticking. She feels this frantic need to figure out the wallpaper's secret. She's totally convinced there's a hidden world behind that ugly pattern and that she's the only person who can crack the code. Okay, and this is where things get really fascinating. The line between what's real and what she's imagining just completely dissolves. It's like the wall between her mind and the wallpaper itself just crumbles away. And you can literally track her breakdown through these really vivid, super disturbing details. First, there's a yellow smell that she says follows her everywhere. Then, she notices this weird smudge along the wall way down by the floor. At night, her vision gets crystal clear. She sees a woman trapped behind the pattern, shaking it like prison bars. And during the day, she swears she sees that same woman creeping around the gardens outside. And here it is, the big moment, the turning point. She finally admits that she's been creeping around the room too. You see, she doesn't just see the woman anymore, she is the woman. In her mind, they've become one and the same. So now that she fully believes she is the trapped woman, everything changes. Her obsession becomes a mission. We're on the final day at the house, and her new plan is about to lead to that absolutely shocking ending. And this isn't just some random act. No, she's got a step-by-step plan. On their very last night, she's going to lock herself in, get rid of the key, and do the one thing she feels she has to do: tear down the paper and set the woman free. The door is locked. The key has been thrown out the window. This is it. Her final, frantic mission is underway, and there is absolutely no turning back now. She goes completely wild. She's ripping and clawing at the walls. The bed is bolted to the floor, and when she can't move it, she gets so enraged that she starts biting it. And all the while, she's convinced the heads in the pattern are shrieking at her as she destroys their prison. This moment right here is critical. Her break from reality is complete. She looks out the window, sees other women creeping around, and thinks, oh, they must have escaped from the wallpaper too, just like me. In her mind, she's not a person in a room anymore. She's a creature who has finally clawed her way out of the paper.
And that brings us to the final, chilling showdown. Her husband, John, comes home, and he finds a locked door standing between him and his wife. So picture this. John is outside, totally panicked, pounding on the door, yelling for her to let him in. And on the other side, she's bizarrely calm. She just tells him, matter-of-factly, that the key is on the ground outside by the front steps. When he finally gets the door open, this is what she says to him. It's this triumphant, yet absolutely terrifying announcement. She says she's free from him and from Jane. Now, this is the first and only time that name is mentioned, and it's pretty much accepted that this is her name. She has literally shed her own identity. And what does he see? He sees his wife on her hands and knees, just circling the room over and over. And that strange smudge on the wall? Now it all makes sense. It's a groove that she has worn into the plaster with her own shoulder from creeping around the room endlessly. The sight is so horrifying that he just faints dead away.
This final image is just devastating. Her freedom is here, but it's freedom inside of total madness. She is so far gone that she doesn't even react to her husband's unconscious body on the floor. He's just another obstacle for her to step over on her endless loop around the room.
And that's the powerful question the story leaves hanging in the air. By tearing down the wallpaper, she totally believes she's won her freedom. But in the process, she's built a brand new prison inside her own mind. It makes you ask, what really is freedom? And what is the terrifying cost of being trapped?